Hi, my name is Elise, and you're listening to Chatterbox Island English Podcast. Hello and welcome back to Chatterbox Island English Podcast. I'm your host, Elise. As always, we're gonna chat about different topics in English on this podcast. So in the last episode, we talked about the concept of minimalism and how to implement it into your daily life. So if you haven't listened to that episode or you want to listen to any previous episodes of this podcast, you can click on any platform that you're listening to right now. So for today's episode, we're gonna talk about something that I'm sure many of us are very familiar with, and you are probably using it right now, which is social media and how it affects us both in positive ways and negative ways. Now, this could be a huge issue to tackle with, but I want to start with two questions. 1. Are you on social media? 2. If so, which social media platforms are you on? So there are tons of different social media platforms out there right now. And for me, I'm currently on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, PTT, Reddit, which is kind of like a foreign version of PTT. And I use different social media platforms for different purposes. So I usually read local news or just generally what's going on in Taiwan on Facebook. And I use Instagram to see what my friends are up to. And I read international news or what's trending abroad on Twitter. As for PTT and Reddit, I usually just follow specific communities on those platforms to keep up with what's going on within the specific communities that I'm interested in. So for example, I am really interested in movies. So I would regularly check the movie community on PTT or Reddit. As you can see, I am kind of a heavy user when it comes to social media. So of course now there are many other different social media platforms such as Snapchat, which I don't think many people in Taiwan are using it. YouTube in some ways, I think. And Tumblr, which is kind of like a blog. TikTok. I'm sure many of you know that it's a place where you can post short videos. And Flickr, which is a social media where you can share your photography and you can follow many different people who also love photography. So over the past decade and a half, more and more people are using many different types of social media platforms. And according to American Psychological Association, only 5% of adults in the US reported using social media in 2005, and now it's more than 70%. And keep in mind that this figure is only adults. It hasn't included teenagers who are using social media. And of course, it's not just the number of people using social media that is growing, but also the time we spend on it. And that's bound to have some impacts on our lives. But first, let's just go through some positive aspects on social media, because I think most people just kind of take it for granted or forget that how convenient our lives are because of social media. And the first one is it helps us communicate and stay up to date with friends and family around the world. That sounds so easy right now, but just imagine what it was like before social media. You wouldn't really know what is going on in other people's lives. Now with just a post or a live IG story, you can share what you're doing at the moment with your friends. And the second one is it helps us find new friends and communities. So like I mentioned before, I like movies, so I go on Facebook and I find a group that discusses movies. And you can go on PTT and Reddit also and find similar groups or communities that share the same interest as you. The third one is you can express or share your thoughts and creativity on social media. And I think many artists and writers post their works on Instagram or other popular social media sites and gain popularity from there. And it can also be a personal emotion outlet. And the fourth one is you can join events or campaigns to raise awareness on certain important issues. And you can also take part in any entertaining events online or even in real life. I think we all know these positive aspects or functions of social media, but these positive aspects can also become the negative ones. Social media is like a double-edged sword. So now let's look at how social media influences us in a bad way. And the first one is, of course, while it's true that we can communicate and stay connected with our friends through social media, it doesn't mean that we actually feel connected. Studies have shown that people feel less happy or satisfied the more they use Facebook or other social media. In general, social media seems to provide the connection between people on the surface, but it also leads to greater feelings of social isolation or even jealousy, making us feel that our lives are more miserable or worse than others. And that leads us to the second point. It makes us constantly compare our lives with others, which is mentally unhealthy. So part of the reason why we feel socially isolated is because when we scroll through our feeds on social media, we often see the better or more positive sides of other people's lives. But just think about when you post something. Do you share more about the happiness in your life or the frustration that you're going through? I think most of us want to paint our lives in a positive way on social media to showcase that we're doing great, and we don't want others to know about the struggles that maybe some of us are actually going through. And when you see your friends or maybe other celebrities that you're following on social media are having a great time, you might unconsciously compare your life with theirs. And the next one is social media is designed to be addictive because we are connected with so many people on social media. It's impossible to go through all of the feeds and information. It's like a rabbit hole that you can just deep dive into. And some people may even neglect their own personal life or well-being. It becomes a place where people can escape from their own reality. And that's why we feel more lonely or bored when we get off social media. So I have or had definitely been a heavy user of social media to a point where the first thing that I did every morning when I woke up was to scroll through my Instagram. And of course, I still enjoy the positive aspects of social media, such as being able to communicate with my friends in real time or getting useful information and news around the world. I've also noticed how it negatively affects me, especially mentally. As I mentioned before, I feel worse about myself when constantly seeing other people's positive or happy posts on social media. Also, I feel like I'm very easily affected by some major events or news happening both in Taiwan and around the world. As we all know, 2020 has been a crazy year so far. So seeing the news every day can be a bit overwhelming for me sometimes, and I get down when I see those news. I'm curious if any of you guys also feel the same? Like, do you feel more down sometimes when you see those negative news or your friends' positive posts on social media, and then you feel like your life is more miserable or worse than theirs? And one thing I'm trying to do right now is not to spend so much time on social media every day. Much like what we talked about in the previous episode where we discussed nomophobia. There are some apps that can prevent us from using our phones for a period of time. So what I'm trying to do right now is, instead of scrolling through social media randomly, I would try to read books or magazines. I'm just trying to spend less of my spare time on social media because I realize that it's starting to affect me in a negative way mentally, and I feel less satisfied about my life the more I scroll through social media and seeing other people's lives. And what about you? Do you use any social media? If so, how many social media platforms do you use and how much time do you spend on them? Feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the YouTube comment section. And that's all for today's Chatterbox Island English podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to our show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts. You can also find our shows on YouTube and go on our website, that's www.eisland.com.tw for more information. I'm your host, Elise, and I'll talk to you soon in the next episode. Bye!